When you look at children's development, nothing is more important than speech and understanding. If your child is slow to start speaking, check they can hear and be sure all their other development is on track. If worried, talk to your infant welfare sister. To accelerate speech and development, talk, play, and do things together. This isn't the terrible twos, it's a magic age. Savour it.
Brought to you by Nestlé Mio, in the interest of children's development.
For little kids to grow into big kids, they could use a hand. Nestlé Mio, helping kids develop.
Baba, black sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. 1 for the master and 1 for the dame, and 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane.
Hello, I'm Dr. Christopher Green. I'm known for my ideas about the interesting behaviours of young children. I'm a specialist paediatrician and I work at the new Royal Alexandra Hospital for Children in Sydney, Australia. Here I work with child development, difficult behaviours, and I specialise in the art of keeping stressed parents sane. I've written 3 childcare books: Babies, Toddler Taming, and Understanding ADHD. These have been quite influential, both here and overseas. In fact, over 1 million are currently on bookshelves in the UK, USA, and in Australia. In Australia in the 80s, and more recently in the UK in the 90s, I've worked actively in the drive to bring modern ideas and modern treatments to general acceptance. The battle is largely won, but up-to-date information is always important, and that's what this video is all about. Now, feeding, food and little children. This is a thing that worries parents so much. And it's all difficult because if you look at an infant at 10 months of age, they're these sort of podgy children like the Michelin man, all these rolls of fat. And you look at them at about 14, 15 months of age, they're all legs and arms and all the fat is gone. Now, around that time, toddlerhood starts, and at toddlerhood, they may decide they're not going to eat their food. So you've got a child who maybe has eaten really well, eaten. Then at a year or 14 months, they start being fussy with their food. They cease being a Michelin man and become a skinny, and you think, he's wasting away in front of me. He's starving to death. We need to do something about it. So first message is, remember that their body shape changes at this stage. It doesn't mean that their stubbornness is doing anything at all to their nourishment. They're probably doing very nicely. They're just developing muscle instead of quite so much fat. It's really important not to fight over food because really they call the shots. You can put food in their mouth, but there's no way you're going to make them swallow it if they've decided it's going to stay in their mouths. That's the way it is. So you mustn't fight. They have the upper hand. And the trouble is, the more you fight, the more you get worked up, and really it doesn't get you anywhere at all. The first aim is to aim for a wonderful, healthy, varied diet, the way that we've read about in all the best books, and you try to get that if at all possible. If, on the other hand, you have got a hunger striker, one who you find it very hard to get food in, you have to go to the basics. And the basics are, first, ask yourself, are they growing? Are they full of health? Are they full of energy? And if that's the case, generally they're doing very well. So many parents tell me, he eats hardly anything at all, but he never stops moving. I mean, if you had a car that used next to no petrol and yet had immense energy and speed, you would think that that was efficiency, but in children we seem to think it's a problem. When in doubt, give the foundation food, the athlete foods, the foundation foods to start off with, and they are bread, cereal, pasta, rice. Most little children will eat at least 3 of those with other things. So the foundation in, you'll get those. You then need some sort of meat protein-y type stuff. Now, probably the most popular meat that we can get into children these days is chicken. Chicken, spaghetti sauce would be another very popular one. Egg can be sort of polluted into all sorts of things if you want to get that in also. But usually if you go that way, you will get some. And remember that we adults eat far more protein than we need. And probably we're trying to get more than children need also. Then we need some calcium for bones and teeth. And of course, milk is the great calcium food. If you've got a child who drinks lots of milk, they're getting lots of calcium and they're getting lots of kilojoules with that also. If they don't drink milk, then there are lots of other things. They're like Nestle's Mio, this dairy snack that gives calcium. There's things like yogurt. There's things like cheese and so on. So there are many ways you can get calcium into them without worrying so much when you've got a child who doesn't take a lot of milk. And then, of course, vegetables. Probably 50% of little children don't eat as much vegetable as you folk would like them to eat. And that worries you a lot, because the old view was they have to eat up their spinach, they have to eat up their greens. And in fact, I've spent so much of the last 20 years with mothers fighting over reluctant little children, trying to cram spoonfuls of green leafy stuff down their throats, and they say to me, "He's got something wrong with his swallowing, Dr. Green." And you say, "What do you mean?" "When I put this spoon halfway down his throat, he goes, ugh." Of course he does. He didn't want it there in the first place. I'd do that if you did that to me. The big breakthrough has been realizing that vegetables aren't the be-all and end-all, and if you're having difficulty, you give them the foundation food, and if they don't take vegetables, if they take fruit, that is good enough. Dietitians allow us to swap fruit for vegetables. If they don't take any fruit, if they take fruit juice, that gives them their vitamins, and then they take their bread, cereal, pasta, rice, they're doing pretty well. So please, if you've got a child you are having difficulty with, give them the foundation, then the other bits. Sit down at the end of the day and add up all the bits they've eaten in the day, and you'll generally find they're doing very nicely in their diet, and there really isn't a problem at all. There is one problem, and that is that so many parents think children should eat 3 big meals a day. But I mean, sheep don't eat 3 big meals a day. Cows don't eat 3 big meals a day. They graze all day. And it may be, in fact, that grazing children are just as healthy as children who eat 3 big meals a day. So we have to get rid of the hang-up that we learned from mum and grandmum. I see many parents who are very worried about their children's eating. And I can tell you the vast majority of those parents have got children who are eating a very good diet if only they just realized it. So please, if you are worried, look at what they're eating, and generally you can start to relax. The sort of questions we hear about diet are things like fats. You know that fat is public enemy number 1 at the moment, and we have to restrict fats in adult food and in teenagers' food. But do we restrict it in toddler food? Well, the answer is no. Toddlers burn up so much energy. They need every bit of fat to sort of fire up their furnace to keep them powered. And so really up to the age of 5, you don't restrict fats in any way with young children. After the age of 5, you go a little bit carefully, and certainly in teenage, you need to give them the healthy example of less fat and certainly less of the bad fats, and to try and get that into their diet and give them the example, in the hope that by doing that, you will start giving them that healthy lifestyle that will stop them getting coronaries at the age of 50, teaching them those skills and helping their coronary arteries at the age of 15. Other things parents tell me. The child who is stuck on baby food, he eats this mushy stuff, and you can't get real food into him. Well, don't fight with that. What you do is you take the baby food and pollute it with a little bit of real food, just very little, that no one, even a sort of a forensic analyst, wouldn't be able to see what you were up to, and a little bit more, till finally it's pretty well all your food, and you pretty well have them hooked at that point. And of course the other thing is that you try everything. I mean, you try all sorts of food, the things like the bananas, the baked bean sandwiches, whatever else, till finally you get something that they will take. We also see children at this young age who've got a very poor repertoire of food. I mean, their idea of a good diet is Weet Bix, Vegemite sandwich, a bit of chicken, glass of milk, good night. And I mean, it wouldn't go well at a posh Sydney hotel. They would think this wasn't good in the a la carte menu. But it's fine for them. And once it's hit the stomach doesn't think, gosh, I would have liked meat from a cow and a pig and a this and a that and vegetables. They're just looking at the nutritional value. And even if it is a bit boring, if the nutritional value's there, that's fine. Tonics. Oh, people often think he doesn't eat very much. Let's give him a tonic, it'll help his appetite. The view nowadays is that tonics don't make much difference at all, so we don't really prescribe them. Vitamins, of course, is another one that we always feel, the child isn't eating enough there before we give them vitamins. What I often do is I prescribe vitamins to a child. I know it's not going to help the child, and I tell the mother, it's not going to help the child, but it's going to stop you worrying. And so let's give them vitamins anyway. So if you're worried about the diet, it's so easy to get the vitamins, and if you take them within moderation, they're not going to do any harm. If you're giving iron, remember it makes the poos go black, and don't rush them to the doctor and say, gosh, he's bleeding to death, there's something awful happening to him. It's just you're giving him iron. Child chucks food in high chair. Gosh, you've seen that, haven't you? Mess everywhere. Don't rationalize. Remember, at this young age, they don't have much sense. Buy big sheet of plastic, put it under high chair, hose the whole works out regularly. Child fiddles with his food at night. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. That's usually the sign they're telling you, I've had enough food, I'd like down. So when they start fiddling, don't start arguing with them. Lift them calmly, wipe their hands, put the food in the fridge, let them go about their business. Half an hour later when they say, Mommy, I'm hungry, you say, I have a lovely meal prepared for you. It's a little bit tepid at the moment, but here it is. And don't get into too much of a fight over that at all. Milkaholics, children who drink and drink milk and you can't get them onto any solid food because they drink so much milk. Remember that milk is a very good food. Little cows, when they're born, are this big. They drink nothing but milk and they're that big. So there must be something pretty good in milk, otherwise they wouldn't be taking it. So if you have got a child who drinks masses of milk but nothing else, what you do is you try to halve the amount of milk they take, and then hopefully that will give them appetite for getting some more real food into them. But certainly milk is a very good food in its own. It doesn't have a lot of fiber in it, that's the main point. One of the other things that I push very hard at the moment is that mealtime should be a time for families to be together. And if you see it from the child's point of view, little toddlers waited all day for Dad to come home. Dad walks in the door like the relieving cavalry, and they're so excited. This is just so wonderful. And he's acting a little bit sort of over the top, and he's a bit tired and grisly, but he's really having a great time. They then sit at the mealtime, and Mum and Dad are both there, the two most important people in the world, so he's even more over the top. He knocks something over, he spills something, he says something nasty, he makes a raspberry noise. Go to your room. Please, 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 remember that it is a time of togetherness. Don't get so stuck on manners that you forget that it is a time for families and a time for communication. In the older children, I've got a really difficult hyperactive child I look after of about the age of 8, and we so believe in the meal times together that we've only got 3 rules for him. You can touch anything you want as long as it's not your sister. You can say anything you want as long as it doesn't annoy your sister. And you can kick anything you want as long as it's not your sister. And other than that, we're just going to have a happy family meal together. So don't let manners wreck getting on together. And then there are the parents who tell me, the 2-year-old, she only eats junk. Junk, junk, junk. And the question is, who buys the junk? I mean, does the 3-year-old get into the Commodore in the morning, drive down to the supermarket, load up a trolley of junk, and bring it back and eat it? And also, get off their case. I mean, so many of you stand over them saying, now eat up this, there's no dessert if you're not going to eat it up. And there's so much fussing of that. If you went to a posh restaurant and the waiter stood beside you and said, just one thing, madam, you're not going home till you finish every bite, and there will be no dessert menu. So don't get too serious about food. Remember, it is for nourishment, and it is also a time for good communication in families. So the message of this is, many fights with food are totally unnecessary. Add up all they eat in the day, give them the foundation food. Generally, you'll find you're fussing over nothing at all. Don't fuss over food. You can't force children. They have the upper hand. They will decide what's going down the big tube and what's staying in the mouth. And now, toilet training. The main problem with toilet training is you start too young. 2 is about right, though sometimes 18-monthers sort of surprise everyone in their toilet train, but it's usually 2 to 2.5, and that's about right. But parents get into a knot. They say, my 20-monther isn't toilet trained. They get all worked up, and the child picks up on the parents' angst, and of course it puts toilet training back dramatically. Now, there's some rules for toilet training. First of all, no child can be wee-wee trained until they know they're wet. I mean, there's no point saying to a child, why didn't you do it in the toilet? And they're quite oblivious that there's a puddle under them in the first place. So they must know they're wet. They then need to know that they're wet before the event. So they'll tell you, wee-wee mum, but I mean, even if you were an Olympic sprinter, you're not going to get there on time. And then eventually they give you a little bit more warning and you can take them. But certainly with wee-wees, once they know they're wet, you can generally train them quite easily. But they must know they're wet or you get nowhere with that at all. And of course, remember that they then are very unreliable for a long time. Little children leak dramatically. They leak whenever they're too busy. They leak when they're sleepy. They leak whenever they're tense. Even when children go to preschool at the age of 3, many little children leak. I mean, mothers will send a spare pair of pants in with their bag because many will leak in that time of stress. Toilet training comes, bowel and wee-wee training, it comes, and it really hangs by a thread for about the first year. It's in at 2, and really till the age of 3. It just takes the wind to start changing from the north to the south, and they start weeing themselves again. It doesn't take much to knock them off the straight and narrow, and you don't want to get too analytical about it all. Bowel training, 3 steps. First, you've got to get them to sit on the potty or the toilet, and the rationale in that is a child cannot do anything in the potty till they sit on the potty. So get them to sit. Second step is you get them thinking about it, thinking about doing something on the potty or the toilet, and the chances are that they will do it eventually. And the third thing is whenever they're thinking about it and they finally do it, you reward. Sit, think, reward. How do we get them to sit? Remember, going back to the beginning of this talk, a behaviour which pays off will generally be repeated. So if they sit on the potty, we say, that's good, let's read you a story. You give them full-on attention. So they sit and they're happy. You've now got them sitting 3 times a day, and we use a little bit of human physiology for that, and that is we sit them after meals. And the human physiology states, when stomachs are full, it stretches the wall of the stomach, it triggers off a nerve that goes down to the tail end and gives it a tweak, and there's a sporting chance something may drop out. So we use this as a means of trying to get them to do something in the toilet after meals 3 times a day. Now, everybody's sitting calmly. We then don't tell them you'll do it. We say, you're nearly 2, and 2-year-old boys do poos in the potty. We'd be so proud of you. We'll ring up Dad at work and tell him all about it. And they sort of sit and they think about it, and after a while it happens, and away you go. You don't tell them, do it, because there's the other bit of human physiology, which I mentioned before. Stressed human beings close shut all watertight doors. You'll do it now. No way! And it won't happen. And then, of course, 10 minutes later, they relax. It happens. You did that on purpose. You're doing it deliberately. So don't get into that. Sit, think, reward, give it time, and it comes very well that way. Nighttime training. The average Australian is toilet trained at 33 months at night, but there's a great range of normality. And in fact, 1 in 10 of all your children will still be wetting the bed when they go to school at the age of 5. 1 in 10. You won't know it. You'll go to the parent-teacher meeting. Over here, people will be boasting and saying things like, my child reads so well, he's like Laurence Olivier reading sonnets. My child plays the violin by the Suzuki method. And you'll be thinking, my child wets the bed every night. But you won't say that. So you don't know that the fact is that 3 of that class will be wetting the bed every night, but nobody boasts about it, but you don't know about it. So it is very common. What do we do with nighttime wetting? The time to remove the nappies is when you're getting about 5 out of 7 dry nights a week. When you've about 5 out of 7 dry, the chances are you can take them out of your nappies. If you're having a wet night every night and you remove the nappies, you're going to get wet bed every night, and that's not too wise. If you've got a few dry nappies, say 2 nights a week or so, you might then lift them when you go to bed. So they go down at 8, you then lift them at 11 o'clock when you go to bed, lift them, put them on the toilet, empty them, and then put them back in bed. And if that doesn't upset them, it often just knocks them into toilet training. But they need to have a few dry nappies before you do that. And then after that, there really isn't anything much to do till the age of 6. You just rely on your washing machine, and at the age of 6, it's one of those bedwetting alarms. You know, the little sensor in the pants or in the bed, it gets wet, it shorts out, rings a bell, you rush in, and you change the sheets, and you change the pajamas, and you put them back in bed. And that works well with 2 provisos. The child must be motivated to be better, and the second one is the child must be fully awake at the time whenever the alarm goes off. And that works in nearly 90% of cases. So at the age of 6, don't get all Freudian and analytical about bedwetting. Just get a bedwetting alarm and see how you get on with that, and there's a big chance you'll be very pleased. Some common questions we hear about toilet training. The one about relapses. I mentioned that it's only hanging by a thread, and often toilet training does relapse. If you've got a relapse with night wetting, a lot of people think this is an emotional problem. This is something that is caused by emotion, and therefore they need to see a psychiatrist. In fact, most children who relapse from dry to wet, in fact, it is just something that happens. There isn't a reason for it. Obviously, if they're ill, and obviously if they've got urine frequency and something like that, you'd get a urine sample and check they haven't a urine infection. But usually a relapse is just one of those things that happens, and you just go with it, and generally they bounce out of it again. By day, we see a number of children who are late to get dry by day, and maybe the ones who are semi-dry but tend to leak, the technique is to remind them. You go when you get up, you go after your breakfast before you go out to play, you go when you come in before the mid-morning break, you go before you go out to play after the mid-morning break, you go before lunch. So the whole day is punctuated by trying to get a regular going habit, and that generally works quite well with those ones. Over the age of 4, you can sometimes use a star chart where you try and look at the day and you say, if he's dry between getting up and breakfast, he gets a star. If he's dry between breakfast and mid-morning, he gets a star. If he's dry between mid-morning break and lunch, a star. And you divide it up in that way, and you see if you can focus on those periods of dryness, and sometimes you knock them into shape in that way. Late bowel training. It's one that causes immense pain. It's interesting that I see 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds who are still pooing in their pants, but actually it would be a 3-year-old probably causes more pain to parents, and it shouldn't be, because it's just on the edge of normal. But a lot of mums, when they see everybody else has got a child who's bowel trained and they can't bowel train theirs, they get very worked up over it. And the problem is, the more you get worked up, the more pressure you put on the child, and the more it makes it nearly impossible for them to be bowel trained. So if you've got a late bowel trainer, 1, check they are not constipated, because sometimes they're a bit blocked up. So you see your doctor, check that there isn't constipation. Once you've got that out of the way, you stop all training and go back to square one again with no training. Back off, get all the pressure, and start from basics. And the basics are, get the child to sit. And you use all the means in your power, and that is rewarding, bribing, giving stuff that rots their teeth. I don't care what you do, but getting them to sit. The trouble is that what you do is that you say, you will sit and you will do. The first step is getting them to sit. There's no interest in doing in the first step. Once you've got them sitting, you then move and put all the rewards on. When you do, all those rewards will hit you. And generally, if they're not constipated, you get the tension out of the situation, and you do it in a stepwise way. You generally do very well with these little children. Do we use a pot or do we use a toilet? It doesn't matter. People get so worked up over it. You know, child emotionally scarred for life because mother used wrong choice. It doesn't matter. Pots are portable, pots go in the car, pots sit in front of the television, pots sit in the kitchen. That's fine. Pots are probably best. Toilets, on the other hand, if you're going to use them, make sure there's a seat that fits their bottom, put bricks under their feet so as they're standing on firm ground, and never ever flush it when they're sitting on it. 18-monthers, we see some young children who've got this amazing habit of smearing. It is not a nice one. Now, anybody who's just about to have their lunch or a meal at the moment, just be careful, this is not one to watch. There are certain children who lie in their cot in the morning, they've got a full nappy, they're thinking, when is mum going to come? And they put their hand down and they think, remember I was taught finger painting at playgroup yesterday, and they make a mess. Now, to walk into that in the morning is not one of the best ways of starting the day for a mother. What can you do about it? It is always at this young age of maximum no sense, the sort of 15, 18, 20 months. It's not after that at all. Get in early and unload is probably a good thing to do. If you cannot do that, put them to bed in some sort of a way that they can't get their hands in. Things like dungarees, across here, and they can't quite get their hand in, and they can't reach anything, and that's probably the best way to go with that. Also, when young children are just about to get their toilet training sorted out, they do the right thing in the wrong place. That is where you suddenly find a big poo behind the settee or something like that, and you think, this is terrible, this is a very pathological child. But again, remember, it all just hangs by a thread at this stage, and there's not an awful lot of sense, and these things happen, and you just need to, with all your discipline ideas of the tone of your voice, the way you react to it, just letting them know that you're unhappy. And when they do it in the right place, there's all this positive reward. You catch them being good, and you reward that, and it sorts itself out as a result of that. Over the years, I've heard some amazing stories from parents about a lot of things. One of the ones I really loved was toilet training, and it was a mother who told me about toilet training her little boy, and she said, my husband works in Sydney in the North Head treatment plant. Now, for those who don't live in Sydney, the North Head treatment plant is where they collect all Sydney's sewage so as they can sort of pump it onto the beach, as you often think. And he was working there, and she said the way that we trained our little boy was we said, John, sit on the toilet, do something, pass a little message down the pipe to your dad. And now, the specialty of the house, sleep. This is what Christopher Green is really known for. In the mid-70s, I first became interested in this, and in the mid-70s, the way of dealing with sleep problems was one of three ways. Either you let them cry all night, Mum, just let your child cry all night, and that'll sort him out. Another one was, it was a problem of separation anxiety, therefore the mothers went to a psychiatrist to work out why they couldn't separate from their children, and after a year of psychotherapy, you hoped the child would sleep. And the other one was just to fill them full of sedative. And in those days, in the mid-70s, you could buy all sorts of potent sedatives just over the counter from the chemist. Now, these techniques did have a use. I mean, letting a child cry all night, generally they slept very much better because they realized no one was coming in. But it was nasty. The children got hysterical, frightened, and really were disadvantaged by it in a major way, and often they vomited in the process, and it was really a horrible thing to do. And the second thing is that parents who were told to let their children cry all night, it really burnt them up because they didn't feel that was the way they wanted to treat their children. But it did work. The business of sedation works, but it has no end point. It just sedates the child while you give sedatives, but it doesn't provide a cure. And the psychiatric idea was a lot of nonsense. So, what I discovered in those days was that if you took a little bit of the business of letting a child cry and let them cry for a short period of time, but not long enough to get frightened or hysterical, but long enough to register that it was hard work, often they would, after a few nights, realize that it was too much bother waking at night and would settle themselves to sleep. And that's the basis of the green-controlled crying technique. Now, before I go into any more details on sleep, a lot of people don't like these techniques and they think I'm being hard on kids. Can I tell you that if you have got a child who wakes at night and you go and feed them in the middle of the night and put dummies in their mouth in the middle of the night and you're happy about it, please, please do it. It is a wonderful thing to do and it isn't bothering me at all. If you've got a child who wakes at night multiple times and it isn't bothering you, please, please, please comfort them. It is a wonderful thing you're doing. If you have a child who comes to your bed every night and you all sleep there as a cast of thousands and everyone's happy, it's not bothering me at all. But if this is damaging your life, damaging your relationships, damaging your mental health, for goodness sake, do something about it. Because sleep deprivation makes well-spirited mothers, it turns them into ratty, intolerant parents who give their children a very poor deal by day, and that is not a way to recharge relationships. That is a way to damage relationships, and that is not what the toddler taming message is about. There are 3 areas of sleep problems that we need to look at. The child who won't settle at night, you know, all those curtain calls and procrastinating and won't go to bed. I suppose they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't be so keen on hanging on to you if they didn't love you. I suppose that you should say, isn't this lovely? The child thinks I'm pretty special. Otherwise, they'd clear off and say, thank goodness I'm rid of that woman. So there must be something in it, but it is a bit tough when you would like a little bit of time to regroup after a busy day. And the second one is the middle of the night wakening, which is probably by far the worst. If you've got a child who wakes multiple times, you really can get yourself into great stress and great emotional damage from it. And the other thing is it often gets parents at each other. It gets husbands really at wives and wives at husbands and husbands threatening to leave home and all sorts of things going on. So it's not a good one. And the third one is the coming to your bed at night. So let's look at those one at a time. The child who won't settle to sleep. The secret of this is routine, routine, routine. We have a bath at 5 o'clock, we have our dinner, we have quiet play, we go to bed, we have a story, I sit for a little while, good night, John, see you in the morning, clear out. And that's the routine. And it's important, it conditions them to that, and it works very well. It is best if they actually settle themselves to sleep, so as you're not holding them, and it's best if they can actually learn to fall asleep by themselves, though I have no objection to you cuddling them to sleep if you enjoy it. So we do it that way. If they make excuses, and they always do, you know, Mum, lie down beside me, let me run my hand through your hair, I want a wee-wee, this pillow's not soft enough, can I lie in your bed? If you hear all this sort of thing, you've heard it 1,000 times, then you need to just ignore it. You must not allow yourself to be manipulated by this, because they are really procrastinating and dragging their feet. What you can do is, you put them in, you say goodnight, you walk out. They're straight out the door. You can give them a warning, sorry, good night, put them back again. They come straight out again. You can then give them the sort of cold treatment. You just don't pay attention. So before you are giving them full attention, now you're talking to your husband and you're really ignoring, and then after a few minutes you say, sorry, you were supposed to be in bed, back. If they come again, you can say, I'm sorry. If you come out again, I'm going to block the door. This seems very hard, but if you're going to do it the hard way, you have to be firm. And the way that we do it is with a green patent loop of rope trick. I talked about that before, the loop of rope round the inner door handle of the child's bedroom door, onto another door handle down the corridor, allows the door to open this amount. They're not locked in, they just can't get out. And then they may cry, and then you take it from there. A kinder way of doing it is, when you finish the story, move to the other side of the room and sit for 10 or 15 minutes, giving a presence, just being there, till they settle themselves to sleep. But don't allow yourself to be manipulated. Lie beside me, do this, I want just a presence but nothing more. And that's about the best you can do with that. Usually, if you really want it to work, you can make it work quite quickly. Waking in the middle of the night causes a lot of trouble to parents. Now, to understand this, you have to understand what sleep's all about. Sleep is not a continuous period of unconsciousness. When you go to bed at night, you go into deep sleep, you dream for a while, you wake up and say, gosh, it's dark. You go down to sleep again, you wake up again and say, gosh, it's 4 o'clock, and you're going in and out of sleep all night. That's the way it goes, and toddlers will be just the same. But when you wake, You don't kick your partner and say, it's 4 o'clock, get me a drink immediately, read me a story. You have learnt a long time ago that that doesn't work, so you settle yourself to sleep, and that is all I ask of you toddlers. So our aim is to try and get them to be adults and settle themselves to sleep. Now, an illustration. 18-month-old child still being breastfed at night. 18 months ago goes to bed, he goes down into the deep plane of sleep. He dreams for a while, he lightens, he comes up near the surface of sleep. He stretches, he grunts, he opens his eyes. There through the darkness, a breast's appearing. He thinks, this is pretty good. So this is marvelous. Down again, deep plane, dreams for a while, lighter, up to the surface, stretch, grunt. It's there again. Now I believe in the genie of the lamp. All I need to go is grunt. Your wish is my command. Now, I'm not against breastfeeding at night, but can't you see that if the moment they call out, you come, they will call out. But if you rigged the odds, and tonight, when they rub the lamp, they have to wait 5 minutes before the genie appears. And when the genie comes, only gives them half a wish. They rub the lamp again. 7 minutes, half a wish. Again, 9 minutes, half a wish. And it builds up till you've something like 15 minutes. You'd throw the thing in the garbage and say, this is a dud lamp, let's go to sleep. And that is how the technique works. Wake tonight, leave them 5 minutes. Or whatever suits you. It's individual. It's what you can put up with and what works. You then let them cry for, say, the 5 minutes. You then come in, you pat them in the cot, or you cuddle them. Cuddle, cry. And at this point, they're thinking, now I've got her. This is looking very promising. I'm going to go in and sit in front of the television. I'm going to get a bottle of breast. This is great. I'm going to go to sleep with my head on her shoulder. But it's cry. And when they're thinking, you put them down, you walk out. Hey, that wasn't supposed to happen, they think. So they cry again. You leave them 7 minutes this time. And they think, why is she not? Oh, here she is. Cuddle, cry. This is looking good. Down, out. And you build up until they say, I know they come. I know I'm not feeling frightened, but it isn't worth the hassle. Let's go to sleep. A good technique. We find that over the age of 2, you can almost have a 100% cure rate, usually within 3 nights. It's a very good technique. Between 1 and 2, it's probably about 90%. And under the age of 1, it's not so good, but it has got a place. Now, I want you to be gentle with children under the age of 1 because they're still babies and we don't want to upset them. But certainly, this technique is used in a modified form by many places around the world in very young children and very successfully. And it can be used if you think it is necessary. Okay, you've used the green controlled crying technique and it has failed miserably. And the way it fails is that when they've cried, you think, I'm going to be up all night, this isn't going to work at all. We use a very simple technique now for those that are not working well, and that is that when the child has had the technique used on them for, say, an hour, so that's building up till an hour of time from when they first woke, at that point, we do something which is psychologically very unsound, and that is we give in to them. So if lying down beside them will get them to go to sleep, giving them a bottle of breast will make them go to sleep, you just give in. Now, it's all wrong. You shouldn't do it because it's rewarding the wrong behavior, but it's rewarding it after an hour of hard work. And you can give in, and then you settle them to sleep. But the next time they wake, you must make sure that you keep the technique going again for at least that hour before you give in. And we find that those that we're having difficulty with, we have success by doing it that way. Parents' bed. The joys of having kids who kick you at night. Kids have a different magnetism to their mums and dads. While we lie north-south, they seem to want to lie east-west. And there are so many parents where dad sleeps on the settee and the mum sleeps with the child. And it isn't really a great way of running a relationship. I think it is better to try and evict them if it is causing you trouble. If you're enjoying it, that's great. But if you're not, could I suggest you evict them? And what you do is they come to your bed, out they go. They come again, out they go. They come again, you then have to immobilize doors, and that is either the green patent loop of rope trick, or just take a little rubber wedge and kick it in under your bedroom door, so as they come up to it in the middle of the night and go bump, 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 and it doesn't allow them to get in. The other thing you can do with children who come to your bed is it's a halfway house solution, and that is that you put a mattress beside your bed on the floor, and they can come to your room and they can stay on that mattress, but they're not allowed to get to any higher altitude than that. They stay down there. And that's one we use when we don't want to be all that tough with kids. But certainly it is up to you what you wish to do, and if you want them to be evicted, that is the way it goes. Just be aware that when relationships break up, I would say that the majority of children end up in the mum's bed, and the mums say, I didn't really want them there, but I think secretly they were saying, I don't want you there, but they're sort of beckoning them in because they find that the company is good for them. And that, of course, is a great problem if you have a new relationship, because the child, first of all, doesn't want anyone new in their life, and secondly, doesn't want to get out of their mother's bed. So just be aware these things do happen. And coming to the parent's bed, of course, that's completely allowable with things with nightmares. If a child wakes up very frightened, you can bring them to your bed. If there's thunder and they're frightened of that, you can bring them to your bed. If they're sick, you can bring them to your bed. All these things are allowable. I'm not being tough on kids. We must be gentle to kids. But when they are really getting to you, you need to put some rules in place. Other questions. A lot of children don't do an awful lot of sleeping. And the mothers say, you know, he won't go to bed till 11 o'clock at night, and he's up at 6 in the morning, and he doesn't do much sleeping by day. How do I get him to sleep? And I ask the question, who is he like, you or your husband? And often you find you've got a mum or dad who sleeps for about 5 hours, and that gene seems to have landed on your child, and then you complain to me about it. So I think that you need to realize there are human beings who don't need as much sleep as others. I mean, some of the leaders, Churchill, I think, slept about 4 hours a night during the last war. Maggie Thatcher, I don't think, slept very long. I mean, there are many people who are quite famous who don't do much sleeping, and you can inherit a child like this, and no amount of anything is going to change it. That's the way it is. So you just need to try and make it as easy as you can for yourself. Put them to bed a little bit later, try to keep them quiet in their room, entertain them in their room, and just accept that that is the way it is going to be. Children giving up the afternoon sleep, this is one that so upsets parents, because that is that sacred time to you, that you can have time to yourself, and then suddenly they wake in the afternoon. And you get into this awful dilemma. If I have an afternoon nap, then he's up till 10 o'clock at night. And if I don't have an afternoon nap, he sleeps, but he's a bit grisly in the late part of the day. There comes a point when you just have to accept that they're going to be a little bit grisly, and that's the way it is going to go, because an afternoon nap is really going to cause problems later in the day. You can't have it both ways. Nightmares. Children who wake in the middle of the night, terrified of things that are going on, very, very common. We must comfort. And that's really what parents are for. You come and you comfort. Of course, sometimes the nightmares aren't nightmares. They're just a means of trying to get you to run in. They wake up in the middle of the night and they think, who of all the people in the world would I really like to see at this moment in time? I mean, would I like to see Nicole Kidman? Would I like to see Tom Cruise? Would I like to see Elvis? Who would I like to see? My mum, that's who I'd like to see. So they say that they're beasties in their bed or something and cry, and you have to come in and see them. So if they wake with nightmares every night, the chances are you're being manipulated. It is a sleep problem. It is something that you deal with the controlled crying technique. If it's occasional, it's probably a nightmare. And the things we do with nightmares, one of the best things you can do is when you comfort them is you turn the pillow over so as the cool side is against the ear, and point out that that keeps the beasties away and that keeps the nasty thoughts away. And it's much nicer with the cool side on the ear. With beasties, a lot of it is just procrastination. You know, Mum, I can't go to bed because there's a bear under my bed, or there's this happening. A mother told me recently that the little one kept calling out and saying there were spiders in the bed. So she got the dustbuster vacuum cleaner, sort of whipped up the sheets, and cleared all the spiders away. Another mother told me, she said, that there were ghosts and beasties around, and she got ghost repellent, which was one of these sprays you use on plants, water with a little glitter in it, and it sort of move it around like that, and you spray around the door frames, and you spray under the bed and around the window, and that keeps the beasties away. There are all sorts of strange things that parents do. Interesting people, parents. And then, of course, there's night terrors. Night terrors, the ones where they wake in the middle of the night, they're absolutely petrified, they don't know why they're petrified, that's the way they are. And it terrifies you, they're still in the deep plane of sleep, you try to comfort them and they push you away. The morning they know nothing about it, but in the morning you're still worked up about it. And that's not due to any emotional problem, it's just something that some children have. It's like sleepwalking, it's very similar to sleepwalking. And all you can do is to try to wake them up, which you generally can't. Some people tell me they sit them in front of the television. I don't know if that does any good or not. The other thing that you can do is it nearly always happens in the early part of the evening, and it's usually at a reasonably consistent time. And if you wake them half an hour before the predicted time, you can often abort a regular night terror if that is something that you've got. And finally, what is the take-home message? The take-home message is Christopher Green's 3 E's. E, expectations. E, empowerment. E, enjoyment. I want you to know what to expect of your children and not to worry yourselves to death over non-problems. I want to empower you to realize that you have an immense ability to change how your children behave if you can only trust in yourselves. And the last E is the E of enjoyment, not to miss the magic. Expectations. Under 3, children are not malicious, they're not aggressive, there is not a bad bone in their body, they just don't think, stuff just seems to happen. Don't take it to heart. Anticipate, divert, boost and encourage the good. All children are different. There were the good sleepers over here, the bad sleepers there, all the rest, they're all different. Don't go on a guilt trip comparing your children with others because you didn't get the same child as other people. Don't blame yourselves. Little children repeat exactly what you say, but they don't usually understand it. Don't do too much debating, rationalizing. They're not quite into that at this stage. Little children don't understand, but they feel. Beware of our emotional baggage. They pick it up with an ultra-sensitive antennae, and they react to it. Children love attention. Please, please, please give the good. Don't get yourself hijacked giving the bad, resenting and fighting with them. That is not the way to parent. Be a positive parent. Try and change your focus from the bad things the children do and try and see the good. Catch them being good. That's good. Well done. I like it when you do that. That's great. Empowerment. There's no one right way to bring up your children, but the rightest way I know is if you love them, enjoy them, and do what feels right and works for you. There's no better way. It's a personal thing. I personally hate dummies. I think it makes children look stupid. But if you've got a really irritable child and you put a dummy in their mouth and they cease to be irritable, you can put 2 dummies in their mouth for all I care, because that is working. If you are cuddling your baby to sleep, you shouldn't cuddle your baby to sleep. There's all sorts of evidence that says a baby who falls to sleep in a mother's arms finds it very hard to sleep and settle themselves down when they wake in the middle of the night. But wait a minute. If you love cuddling your baby to sleep and your baby loves being cuddled to sleep, it's a bit of magic, which the child should have. And if you've got a sleep problem at the age of 2, I'll cure it for you in 3 nights. But enjoy it while it feels right. If you're breastfeeding a 2.5-year-old and everybody says, you shouldn't be breastfeeding a 2.5-year-old, and you're enjoying it and the child's enjoying it, there's no question you do it. That's the way it is. If every night your children are sleeping with you, as far as I'm concerned, they can stay in your bed till they leave home and get married. It's not bothering me. You have to do what feels right for you and not be brainwashed by others. And the last E, the E of enjoyment. One of the saddest parts of my work, and I deal every day with parents and children, it is that many parents are making very, very heavy weather of their little children. Many parents are getting over caught up with all this. Many parents are feeling that their children are the enemy, are out to get them. They're not getting pleasure out of them. Many parents are coping, but they're not enjoying. Now, it really worries me because these little children, they've got those bright eyes that are out on stalks. They're little children who, every bird that flies by is amazing. Every dewdrop, everything out there is wonderful. At 18 months, when you're carrying them around, their finger is out there, taking it all aboard. It's just such a magic time for them. And whenever the imagination comes in, and at the age of 3, and you hear all this verbal stuff, listen to it. One of the nicest stories is one of the oldest ones that I was told years ago by a preschool directress. She said, I went to Bali for my holidays. There I got a little wooden statuette of a native lady with great big breasts. I showed it to the kids at preschool. One little boy looked up puzzled and he said, my mum used to have ones like that, but the baby ate them off. What we've talked about today is not toddler taming. This is about understanding, slowing down, savoring, seeing the magic, and bringing fun back to parenting. Anybody got anything to tell me? Any ideas, any tips?
I don't know about tips. I'd like a tip. I've got a little boy who's almost 2. His speech pattern hasn't really developed yet, and I'm trying to teach him manners. And it's everything's like that. And he wants to get up onto the bench, or he wants something. Please, 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 please. Nothing comes out.
Well, at 2, are manners a priority? Really not.
Probably not.
I mean, it pleases passing strangers and maiden aunts, but really in the big world, the main thing for 2s is, are you having fun together? Are you enjoying getting on together? When you're together, are you relaxed? Really, manners are not a big part of this.
Right. So don't enforce it. Because, if I keep going, then it will dissolve into tears.
Yes,
or disorder.
but you've lost the plot then.
Yeah.
There is no point getting a toddler to cry because you're forcing him to say too. I mean, the way it goes is you teach, imagine it's all gone to plan. You've taught these wonderful manners. He's the most well-mannered child in Australia. And then he goes to school and he picks up on this friend and that friend, and he's soon going around with a crowd like some terrorist gang, and he's losing all his manners. So, just keep plodding away. That's the best you can do. Hi, what else have we got?
Yes, my daughter is 25 months, and when we get into a gridlock situation, I've tried the timeout technique. I take her to her room and leave her there, and I make a quick exit, but she runs after me screaming hysterically. And I try it again, it just happens over and over.
Yeah. Well, at 25 months, her sense, of course, is not their strong suit. I mean, that's still a pretty weak sense age. And the other thing is, if they run out screaming very quickly and you give in to them, a behaviour which pays off, which is running out, has paid off. So I think that the best you can do are things like, is there any way that the door could close that could be opened by her, but it would take a little time to open? In other words, that she might have to get in a chair to get out, or that just gave you a little bit of a head start and you could dash out. You could go the technique we mentioned before of putting yourself in your bedroom.
Right. But then she would scream and bash on the door.
Yeah, well, whose problem is that? And
not very pleasant.
if it was a
how long should I
shouting
do that
for a few minutes, and then you come out and you say, are we going to get on well together? And just don't make a big philosophy about it, and just pick her up, and then start with a clean slate and move on from there.
Okay, so how long should I leave it for? 2 minutes if I'm in my
Very
room?
short. I mean, a minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, but you will know what the time is.
Okay,
So-
and if she doesn't calm down, do I repeat that, or just try and distract her? And
I think
find other
distract and so on. The important thing is we're not trying to frighten our children with discipline. We are trying to to teach them a message. Make sure that you're not putting the child in the room for something that doesn't really matter. If it is something where it's really escalating and you're in getting into a big problem, then it is justified to see it through with reasonable firmness. But don't put them in their room over silly things. At 25 months, it's very young.
Well, for example, it happened this morning, so it was good material for today. We were getting dressed, and she wouldn't get dressed, and she was running away and screaming, and just ended up in hysterics. So I
But again, can I tell you what that is? That is, this morning, you had an agenda to get here. It wasn't her agenda. Her agenda was, I would like Mum to stay with me as long as possible. You probably were running a little bit late, which time constraints are the way of really getting yourself into trouble. So just make sure that you give the time and you recognize things that the way they are, that maybe it was just that she was trying to keep you close to her, because basically she loves you a lot, and she'd much rather have you at home than at this boring lecture.
Thank you.
Hi, look, Dr. Green, I've got a 15-month-old girl who you talk about 1-year-olds not having much sense, who doesn't have much sense. But when I try and discipline her, she just laughs at me. Well, how do I try and teach her anything if it's just going to be, I mean, I just laugh back because it's intoxicating.
Well, it really is. It is a matter of the tone of your voice and the attention. I mean, a 15-monther, you're cuddling and everything's really nice, and then she bites you. You don't say, oh, that was very wrong, what have you done, look at the mark. Instead, you put them down and you walk away, and they think, a minute ago, wasn't it all magic, and now it's different. So you just do it with the feeling and of the tone. When the good things are happening, there's all the twinkling the eyes and all the rest, and there were other things you just say, no, sorry, straight face, move away, and don't take it too seriously. You have another 70 years to sort them out. I mean, they
Another thing, and if this gets on the video, she'll kill me, but she has this habit of doing poos in the bath and in her little swimming pool. And I mean, I put her in the bath after she's done a poo, but she'll do another poo in the bath.
But she's only 15 months. I mean, that's the sort of things that happen. I mean, that's one of the quaint things of going to swimming pools with naked children. That's why you actually keep them in swimming costumes. It's not for modesty, it's just to stop things floating around. And really, again, at that young age, I mean, you can just say, you can say something naughty, but I don't honestly think that she really knows what is happening at that age. At 18 months, 20 months, 2 years, when they're popping out in the bath, that is more of a problem. And that is when you start being a little firmer with it. But at that age, enjoy it. It's lovely.
Oh, yes, great.
Something that we did when my kids were very little, when we knew our second baby was on the way, there was 18 months between them, we wanted to encourage them in that they would always be best friends. And so people kept saying, oh, you're brainwashing your kids, because we kept telling the little girl who's older, oh, you know, this, your brother, is your best friend. Now that they're going off to school and there's a new baby in the house, we can say, well, why don't you and your best friend go outside and play? So we've alleviated a lot of the problems of, you know, jealousy of someone else, and also friends coming and going, because their sibling being their best friend, it's always there with them.
That's a lovely idea. Yes, good one.
Hi, I've just got a bit of a story about being a house husband and about being caught out by my 2.5-year-old son. I'm looking after the 2 children at the moment. We've got Matthew, who's about 9 weeks or so, and Tom, who's a bit older. And my wife told me this story. She said apparently Matthew was crying one evening, and Tom, who's the toddler, came into the room and said, oh, calm down, Matthew, and then apparently walked around the home going, oh, beep, oh, beep, oh, calm down, Matthew. And my wife just said, this is just an image from the days that when I'm off at work, this is what's happening at home during the day. So I was completely caught out there. Be careful what you say. Thank you.
I'm wondering if you've got a secret to solving boredom, because my 16-month-old son, I find if we get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, by 9:30 we've done everything that I can think of doing. We've been outside, inside, bath, food, everything, and I don't know what to do with him then, except maybe go to the supermarket, which is dangerous.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. That's a thing that husbands often don't realise. I can remember when My first boy was born, and I remember coming home one evening and saying to my wife, "What did you do today?" You know, expecting she'd have sort of renovated the house and dug the garden and all the rest. And then when you actually look after them for a while, you realize that you can spend an amazing amount of time just entertaining and not apparently doing anything very much at all. One of the nice things with 17-monthers is that they generally have a morning and an afternoon snooze, which you really hold on to very tightly while you've got it. But it just is keeping them going. 17 months is just on the edge of probably videos. Certainly a lot of children we see who get bored, we put on videos for them. Now, a lot of people say it's babysitting with videos, but there's a certain amount that mothers can do, and putting on a video of Thomas the Tank Engine or the Wiggles or whatever else, if it gives you a little bit of respite, is certainly a good thing to do.
Well, my next question was that regarding sitting still, and you've mentioned several times in your lecture about children sitting on the potty or sitting on the lounge with mum, sitting still in places, and my son never sits still, except when he's asleep. And I sort of have this dream that one day, you know, he will sit on the lounge and snuggle next to me, it would be lovely, but he never ever keeps still, and I'm wondering when will that happen?
Well, talking about sitting on the potty and so on, I didn't say they sit still on the potty, I just want them to sit on the potty. And the other thing, without being rude to you, is it possible that someone near to this child actually has an active gene? Just, is it possible? It is possible. How did I know that? I think that's maybe the answer. I think you've maybe got a more busy child because they've taken after a busy parent. And remember, busy children are never boring. They're not always easy, but they're never boring.
Thank you.
Hi, I've just got a sweet little story that I'd like to share with my daughter. She's just before she turned 2, I'd had a horrific day with her, and I was just at the end of my tether, and I was taking, I think, some paracetamol or something, and she walked in, and the question she asked a million times a day is, "Doing, Mummy?" So the easiest thing was to say, "Taking tablets." "Got a headache?" I said, "Yes." And those few words, she reached up, touched my leg, and just went, "Oh," and stroked my leg. It was just beautiful. After a horrible day, she was so in tune with me that she just picked it up.
Lovely, lovely. One of the things that a mother told me with a really difficult child that I was looking after, and she said, "We have terrible times, but every night when he goes to sleep in his bed, I go and I just stand over him and I just run my hand through his hair, and I think, this is pretty good."
My little boy is 22 months old, and he can be very sensitive, and yeah, sometimes when things get a bit too much and my wife will sort of have a bit of a tear or something like that, it's lovely to see him. He'll come out and he'll put his arms up and you'll come and give her a great big hug, and he's in tune with knowing how she's feeling, and he will actually try and comfort her. It's lovely to see sometimes. But he's a runner. Now, he knows how to operate the latch on the front gate, and we put a strap on the front gate if we know we're going to be in the front garden, but sometimes he does get out. Now, my question is, I've tried everything. You let him go, and you don't know whether he's going to run out on the street. You walk with him, and he'll walk for miles. You run after him, he thinks it's a game and keeps running. What do you do?
And again, the age?
22 months.
Remember, 22 months, not a big amount of sense, and you need to protect them from danger. So I'm afraid it really is fortifying the compound. The tricks that we use, with some children, we put deadlocks on doors that they actually can't get out, the sort of thing that stops burglars getting out of your house. We sometimes have to stop windows being opened, maybe not at 22 months, but certainly with older children. Backyards need to be fortified that children can't escape, because we have a number of climbers that we see. We see a number of children, and in fact, you have a fence and they can get up over it, but if you put one bit of wire along the top, I'm not going to electrify it or anything like that, but just a bit of wire that is not very well supported, so as they hold onto it and it's sort of unsteady, you can usually keep them in. And the other thing is, front gates generally you can't immobilize, otherwise the postman doesn't come and the electricity people can't come and read your meter. So it really is fortifying whatever way you can, harnesses, holding, It doesn't last for long because sense comes very quickly, but little children can get injured and you have to hold on like mad.
Okay, thanks.
Introducing a dairy snack that's great for growing kids. It has all natural ingredients, as well as the goodness of milk and real fruit puree. It's called Nestlé Mio. Nestlé Mio, helping kids develop.
When you look at children's development, nothing is more important than speech and understanding. If your child is slow to start speaking, check they can hear and be sure all their other development is on track. If worried, talk to your infant welfare sister. To accelerate speech and development, talk, play, and do things together. This isn't the terrible twos, it's a magic age. Savour it.
Brought to you by Nestlé Mio, in the interest of children's development.